So this talk is kind of second in the series after my previous talk in London a few months ago on Advancing Bitcoin conference, and there I was talking mostly about the attacks, like general attacks on hardware and how to, well, more from the theoretical perspective, right? So I didn't say anything bad about hardware wallets that exist, and I didn't specify anything on that side. So here I kind of feel a little bit more free because it is a meetup, not a conference, so I can say bad things about everyone. Basically, the reason is that we are building Bitcoin hardware platform, and we are trying to make basically another hardware wallet plus along with that a developer board and a toolbox for developers so that they can do whatever kind of hardware wallets or Bitcoin powered devices. And when you start doing something like that, you obviously want to learn from others what mistake they did. So during this research, I found a lot of interesting attacks, and I found many interesting things what hardware wallet do or do not do, and basically that is what I want to share with you today. This I will skip because we already discussed it. Here are the wallets that I will be talking about. Trezor Ledger are pretty well known. Cold Card is a nice hardware wallet made in the US and allows you to use a complete air gapped, so you don't need to connect it to the computer and you use a SD card to transfer transaction back and forth. And Digital Big Box is a product of a company from Switzerland, Shifts Crypto Security or something. So I split all the attacks into four categories. So the first one is fuck-ups. There are not many in this section because, well, I think that these are very serious vulnerability, and if you have them, then basically your product failed to deliver what you promised, because the first reason for hardware wallets to exist is to protect against remote attacks. So basically, if your computer is compromised, your keys should be safe. And fuck-ups covers this kind of attacks where it doesn't work. Then there are attacks on the software side. Basically, when you write something in software that is vulnerable, then you have an attack, and you can also fix it with the software. Hardware attacks due to certain features of hardware, and some of them can be fixed by software, some not, so another class. And finally, the architecture things. Basically, you have certain limitations when you choose how your hardware wallet works and what protocol do you use, what data you use to verify stuff, and also like what microcontrollers you use. So first, the fuck-ups. The first one is the pretty recent one. It was described in December, so a few months ago, and it was on Ledger. Basically, what happens if you are trying to sign a transaction with Ledger? You connect Ledger to your computer, and your computer prepares transaction and says to the wallet that, okay, here is the input that has 1 millibitcoin or 1 Bitcoin, and this is the derivation path that you need to use to derive the private key to sign it. And these are the outputs. The first output is what we are actually sending, and the second output is our change. So you don't need to show the change on the wallet itself. You basically can provide the information for the hardware wallet to verify that, yeah, this amount will actually end up with an address in the address that the wallet controls. So you use the derivation path to get the private key and to get to figure out that you actually control this address. And then on the hardware wallet side, it displays to the user that, okay, you are sending 0.1 to this address and 001 as a fee. And you don't need to show the change address because you can verify that it will go back to you. The problem in Ledger was that they trusted the computer when the computer was saying that this is the change address. They didn't verify that it will be controlled by the private key from the wallet. So basically, you could replace this address by any other address, just send some derivation path. The Ledger didn't check it, and just removed this output from display to the user, and basically you will send 0.1 Bitcoin to the address you wanted, and you will lose all your funds. Yeah, so this attack was fixed. Basically, they just I don't know the reason why they didn't check that, but now they do check it. But I would say that it is a pretty crucial, critical vulnerability. Then the second one is a very nice hidden wallet feature of the digital bitbox. So, you know, we don't like to reuse addresses. So to derive new addresses and private keys, we use BIP32 and master private and public keys. So basically what it is, the master private key is a pair of 32 byte numbers. One is the chain code, another one is the private key. And then corresponding master public key will be the same chain code and the public key corresponding to this private key. So then, if our computer knows the master public key, it can derive all the addresses and all the public keys underneath that. And if you know the master private key, you can derive corresponding private keys. So it looks cool. And yeah, here is the flow of this hidden wallet feature. So why do you need hidden wallet? Imagine that you were trapped and the robbers just hit you with a wrench until you send them all the bitcoins. Tell them the password and just send the bitcoins, right? So if you have a hidden wallet that they don't know about, then you can easily send the funds and you still have most of your funds securely stored on the hidden wallet. So how these guys implemented hidden wallet? They used the same values as in a master private key, but they flipped them. So basically, in the hidden wallet, they used the private key of the normal wallet as a chain code and the chain code as a private key. What this means that if your computer knows the master public key of the normal wallet and the hidden wallet, for example, you want to check your balances, then you get the chain code from here and the private key from here. So basically, the whole private key for all your funds are transferred to your computer. And this is kind of sad when you try to protect yourself and use a nice feature, and then it screws you up. So now they fixed it. So it was in November, and they fixed it by a normal use of the passphrase. So basically, to derive hidden wallet master private key, you use the same mnemonic with another password. So similar to what Trezor does. So right now it's not an issue anymore, but well, it was also pretty sad to see. Yeah, and it was discovered by Salem Rashid together with a few other vulnerabilities that are not that interesting. Yeah, so these are two major fuck-ups, and now, well, but two is already enough, I would say. Now let's move to the software side.
So what went wrong there? They just didn't do the right checking or validation?
Here?
Yeah, like how does that happen?
Well, basically, if you don't know how exactly master private key works, then you can make such kind of mistakes, I would say, because, well, it's not about the validation. So just the private key should always stay private. It shouldn't go anywhere else. And yeah, what they did, they just screwed up the whole standards implementation. Yeah.
So they made two mistakes. One, they ignored the standard because there was a standard for hidden wallets.
Yeah.
And two, is they wrote their own crypto.
We're
trying to do your own cryptography. Oh, we'll just swap these two things around and what
yeah.
wrong.
Yeah, so normally if you try to do something, you first need to look at the standards that already exist, because there are smart people developing cryptographic standards and they are thinking about all kinds of things that you would never think of. And then if you don't have any kind of standards, then you need to think, well, not even twice, but really many times before you release something like that. Yeah, so I think that this can be solved by security audits at least. Yeah.
And this will be an issue only if you're actually signing with the hidden wallet, otherwise the computer will not know about it.
Not even signing. So normally master public keys are used not to sign, but just to monitor the blockchain. So if you never give your computer the master public key, then it will know your private key for this wallet. So it would be probably okay-ish to use one computer to monitor this master public key and to use another one to monitor this, but then your kind of usability of your hardware wallet is, well, it's not that much. You can just have two different wallets on your phones.
But also the hidden wallet, then it's just one button click away, right? So the guy with the wrench would just say, hey, can you also click the button for the hidden wallet?
I don't know how exactly it was implemented, but probably, yeah. Yeah, so with the password, actually, the password scheme works much better because you have infinite amount of hidden wallets. So if you want to go really crazy, but also another problem is that the attacker will hit you with a range until you give out all of them or just kill you, I don't know.
Yeah, the problem is if they know which addresses you control, they can indeed just keep using the drill or whatever.
Yeah, and that is already the privacy issue that you should solve with coin joins and stuff.
This
Yeah.
could just give you enough plausible deniability in case that happens, not if he has so much information on you. That's how this could save you somehow.
Yeah, I think that in general, kind of disclosing information about your funds is pretty bad. Okay, so the software part. I talk a lot about Trezor in the other parts, not because they're bad, but because they are the oldest wallet and also they are the most collaborative, I would say, because I learned really a lot just by reading their security updates and their blog and talking to them directly. So it's like more eyes are monitoring the code of Trezor, and so more attacks are discovered and they fix it almost instantly. So in that sense, I think that it is actually the great product, and I would recommend Trezor. But yeah, there is plenty of attacks that we can learn from. So one that was fixed like in March a few months ago, and it is pretty relevant to the talk that I gave a month earlier. So it is a glitch during the USB communication. So when you have your hardware wallet and you plug it to your computer over USB, what happens under the hood? The computer asks the hardware wallet, like, who are you, what is your vendor ID, what is your description, and so on. And the wallet should send back something like, okay, I'm Trezor Model T, this is my vendor ID, and blah, blah, blah. And this, before it was happening even before you unlocked the wallet with a PIN. And normally it is fine, so even if the computer will ask you for more bytes than you can deliver, there was a check that, okay, if the computer is asking for more than 14 bytes, then give back only 14, and this is like basically the Trezor Model T. But the problem is that if you are using an application microcontroller that doesn't have any protection against glitches, then if you send this request and if you time everything correctly such that when this comparison of 500 to 14 happens, you either skip this instruction or make it evaluate to a wrong value, then the wallet will just send you 500 bytes. And this happened that after the descriptor there was a mnemonic. So basically asking for 500 bytes would give you, okay, I'm Trezor Model T and here is my mnemonic. So it was fixed very quickly and easily. So basically first for Trezor Model 1, I think that they added a read protected byte. So basically when the microcontroller is trying to read this byte, it will go into the fault. So it will just never go after that. So this is the first protection for Model 1. And for Model T, they made it even easier. They didn't respond to any request until you enter the PIN. And if you know the PIN, then you basically control the wallet, so it's fine. Still, they have this read protection byte, just in case. But yeah, pretty elegant solution, I would say. Then another one is on the side channel of the PIN. So I don't know if you were on the Advancing Bitcoin or not, but basically there is such a thing as side channel attack. So for example, if you are trying, these are slides from that presentation. So if you are trying to verify the pin, so this is the pin that we entered and this is the correct pin. So if you do it not smart enough, then with a standard string compare function, then the microcontroller first checks the first digits. If they're different, then it just returns false. If they're the same, it keeps going. So what you can do, you can just try the first digit and measure the time between the start of the pin verification and the failure. So if the first digit is correct, then the time that microcontroller will take is a little bit longer, and so you know that you guessed the first number. Then you continue the same with the second, with the third, with the fourth. Come on. And basically, instead of trying 10,000 combination, you only can you can fit everything in something like 20. Well, not 20 maybe, but still pretty small number. This was not an issue in Trezor. They had a slightly different issue. So they were comparing the pin digit by digit, and we're keeping it until the end. So basically, if you enter the wrong pin and the right one is 1, 2, 3, 4, then it compared all 4 digits, and at the end returned false. So the time attack was not an issue. The issue was the power consumption and electromagnetic radiation. So when you're comparing 5 to 1, the pattern of the radiation and the power consumption is slightly different comparing to other comparisons like 6 to 2 and so on. So what Ledger Lab did, so it was disclosed by Ledger, they trained a neural network, artificial intelligence, to distinguish between these different comparisons, and so to then given a random hardware wallet, they were able to guess the right pin after, I think, 5 tries or so. So basically, you still have a pretty small delays on this range. If you just try it 5 times, I think it will be something like maybe a day, but still doable. So it was also fixed. And it was fixed in a very smart way. Trezor even released an open source library for encrypted storage. Basically, your mnemonic and your private keys and all the secret information was stored encrypted, and this encryption key is derived by the pin and other entropy from from different sources. For example, the unique ID serial number of the device, and now they are working also on having some randomness, well, not randomness, but some key from the SD card. So basically, given all these keys, you can decrypt the mnemonic, but otherwise you can't. And it is very resistant against all kinds of side channel attacks, because what you always do, you just take this pin, you don't know the correct one, you just have no idea. Then you use that one together with some fancy algorithm to derive the decryption key, then you try to decrypt your secret information, and if you decrypt it correctly, you will see, okay, the first, it looks like a mnemonic, so it's a correct pin. Yeah, so I think it was pretty nice. And it was also disclosed in March.
I'm assuming on the pins that on all the hardware devices, I'm assuming they're implemented the same, right? So you can only have 3 tries.
No, in Trezor you can have as many tries as you want if you are willing to wait long enough. So they use an incremental timer. So basically, between the first try and the second try, it's 1 second. Then after that, you need to wait for 15 seconds. Then for 1 minute, for 5 minutes, and so after 10 tries, you will need to wait for a few days. And then if you fail once again, it will already be weeks, and so on. So they start the timer at the boot. So they increase the counter. Then even if you unplug the device and plug it back, you just need to wait for this time.
Right.
Yeah.
Is this this is a Trezor Model T?
Yeah.
Is it also on the Trezor Model 1?
Yeah, they have very similar firmware.
And what about other, like Ledger and other?
So Ledger have limited number of tries because they are verifying the pin on the secure element.
The thing about that AI.
The power
Yeah.
power analysis. So the Ledger uses the secure element, and secure element was designed to do everything correctly because, well, it's used in banking applications and so on. So for them, it is not the issue. There you normally don't have such easy side channel attacks. On the code cards, they use encrypted. Well, they use a secure key storage. There is another attack on code card. I will tell you about that later. But in principle, it is also not vulnerable for against side channels. I don't know how the digital bitbox implements that because they just have a pretty bad overall security. Maybe.
They're still a very new company, right? They're still a very new company. in comparison.
Yeah. So they are working on the new product that maybe they will fix most of the things. Yeah, hopefully. Then what else do we have? All the Trezor clones probably are very vulnerable to this kind of attacks. In principle, if the hardware wallet uses some kind of secure element, then probably you are fine with these side channels. If it is just an application microcontroller, then there is a pretty big attack surface for side channels and glitching and fault injections. Yeah. Okay.
So could you stand back?
Oh, sorry. sorry.
One feature that I'd love to see in hardware wallets is that it always gives you a delay. That you can just say, okay, if I enter my PIN code, or even before I can enter my PIN code, just wait 24 hours. So like if somebody wants to rob you physically, they have to like wait 24 hours.
And
Or whatever time period you give.
That also means you can't spend your money for 24 hours every time.
Yeah, but sucks, and maybe there's like
worth it.
different PIN codes for different durations, how long you have to wait. But,
But if it's cold storage, that's
well, there is another option. You can have a PIN code that, like in banking applications, that erases, wipes the device. So basically, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, you enter 4, 3, 2, 1, and then everything is erased. I don't know what will happen with you afterwards, but
you need to restore it.
right,
well, to restore, you probably have the seed or maybe Shamir secret sharing.
well,
Yeah.
the timeout gives you plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Then they can always say, why did you configure it that way? Well, because I don't like you guys.
Well, yeah. Okay, so then this attack is pretty old actually, so it's August 2017, so it was fixed a long time ago. The problem was that when you load something into the memory, it stays there for a while. Then when you unplug the device from the power or yeah, basically that. Then it starts to decay, and at room temperature it happens pretty quickly. I think that there should be, yeah. This is a chart of how fast it happens for different devices. And at room temperature it happens like on the 100 milliseconds, I think it is. Yeah, milliseconds. Yeah, so a few hundred milliseconds. But if you take the device, you freeze it, then it can last for 10 seconds, for example. So what you could do, you plug in your Trezor, it loads into the memory your PIN code and your mnemonic phrase, and then when you start, you can trigger an update process, firmware upgrade. So during that, if you, well, so first you unplug the device, plug it back, and then start update process, and then you get your new firmware, and then you can read out the content of the memory, even if the firmware is not genuine. So you can just confirm, yeah, I do want to do this. And the whole procedure doesn't require a PIN, because, well, maybe you forgot your PIN and you just want to wipe your device or something. Yeah, so the solution for this was pretty easy. You just don't load mnemonic until the PIN is entered. And with this encryption storage it became even nicer, so you don't even know the PIN, but still it is attack surface. So you need to be careful about what you store in the memory. Yeah. Then also recent attacks, they are not directly fixed because you need to know the pin and then you control everything. But guys are working on that in Trezor. Again, side channel, when you are computing your public key, you take your private key and multiply it by the generator point of the curve. To make it efficiently, you normally use lookup tables. Basically, it is a huge table where you have G, 2G, 4G, and many other Gs. So G times many different numbers. And then when you have a private key and you expand it, kind of show it in the binary, you just say, okay, here I have 1, I need to add G. Here I have another one, I need to add 2G. Here I have 0, so I don't need to add 6G. I go further and add 8G here. And then all these values you don't compute by yourself, you just take them from the lookup table. So it improves the performance of the signing and public key derivation by roughly a factor of 3. But the problem is that also when you are accessing different regions of the memory of this lookup table, you provide some information to the outside. Again, I think it was the electromagnetic radiation, maybe power consumption. So here the easy fix would be to, well, not to use lookup tables, but multiply the numbers like 3 times slower, but fairly. But it's not really an issue, and I don't know if they will downgrade performance or not, because basically to ask for the public key, you need to know the pin. I see some problems with that in the future when, for example, you have a hardware wallet that supports Lightning Network and you just want to keep it locked at home, and it routes the payments for you, so it does all the automatic stuff and verifies that you are only earning money. So here you can have an attack surface for this kind of side channels. But right now it's not an issue because, well, no one supports Lightning Network yet, and even CoinJoin. Yeah, then another, yeah, so the lookup tables, the side channel. More or less done with the software attacks, now to the hardware side. Trezor again, major player in the talk. So scalar multiplication. Basically, again, the same stuff, even if you don't use the lookup tables and you try to compute the public key. What you normally do during this computation, you take huge numbers, like 256-bit numbers, and you need to multiply them. The microcontroller cannot multiply such huge numbers because, you know, we have 32-bit, 64-bit, so that's kind of the edge. So you need to split it into smaller pieces, and what in current implementation they use a 30-bit numbers, and then the leftover is 16-bit, and then you multiply them. And the problem is that the multiplication instruction on the hardware level, on the semiconductor level, they use slightly different implementation depending on the value of the number. So basically, when you are using 30 by 30-bit numbers multiplication, it will be one instruction. 30 by 16, it will be different, and with two small numbers, even more different. So again, another thing where performance gave you an attack surface on the side channel. So here there is a way to slightly change the implementation of the elliptic curve calculation and to use roughly the same length of these words for multiplication and not like one of them is much shorter than the others. Then you should be safe. But it is already like the hardware problem that need to be fixed by changing the software implementation. Then another hack that was demonstrated on the Hacker Congress in Leipzig in December by Wallet Fail guys. That was a great talk, I would say. And basically what they showed is how you can extract the firmware, including the pin code and the mnemonic phrase from Trezor using a pretty nice tool. I think it looked like this. So you just have the thing, you put there your Trezor microcontroller, and you get everything. So the problem there was that they were able to glitch the chip in such a way that the protection level of the chip that should be, well, that is implemented in, well, by the manufacturer of the chip actually, not by Trezor, can be downgraded. So basically the chip normally have 3 different levels of access to the memory. So level 0 RDP levels, either full access, so when you connect your debug interface you can read and write anything, both from the memory and from the flash. Then there is a level 1 that's used by most of the consumer electronics. When you connect the debugger, you can read only the memory, but you cannot read what is in the flash. And then finally the level 2 that doesn't give you any access to any information. So Trezor normally uses RDP level 2, so you should be safe. The problem is that in the implementation of the I think this STM microelectronic F something something, and I think that it is a pretty common thing for all Cortex M4 from well, 3 and 2 from ARM. This is implemented in software actually. So your microcontroller boots in the level 0, then it quickly changes it to level 1 and level 2, and then you are fine. So if you glitch at the right moment, then you can downgrade from level 2 to level 1, because what glitching does, it can allows you to skip certain instructions or make them complete in a wrong way. So the problem is still that the mnemonic phrase is in the flash. So to use, and here on level 1 you don't have access to the flash. So what you need to do, you need to first somehow move your mnemonic to the memory and then use this glitch. So what they did, they started an update process, and what happens during the update process, normally you don't want the user to re-enter your mnemonic, so you just copy all the secret information into the memory and start writing into the flash new firmware. So if at this moment you glitch and downgrade the protection level to level 1, cool, you have access to the memory and you have mnemonic in your memory, and then you have everything. Okay, yeah, this is how it worked. Oh, another problem that was fixed already by the semiconductor manufacturer, so by ST Microelectronics, and it was discovered on Trezor. So the problem is that on Cortex M3, the one that was used in the Trezor Model 1, there was an annoying bug that you can set the, this protection level by putting a certain value into the register, and then kind of committing this value to write it actually on the chip. And then you should be safe. The problem was that what you could do, you could write to the chip the level 2, and then you write to the register a different level, for instance, a different value, for instance, AA, and the microcontroller, for some reason, was checking not the value that is stored in the microcontroller itself, but just the value in this register. So you can keep it, put any value, actually I think that here it should be AA, without committing it, and you completely remove the read protection this way. So it is also pretty annoying, but it was fixed by implementing the software workaround, but I think that it's a little bit too complicated. So another nice one is from Ledger, actually, also from the CCC conference. How they protected the firmware. So the Ledger architecture looks like you have a secure element, and then you have the microcontroller that controls your display and the buttons, and then you have the USB stack. So the USB for communication. So what happens when you are updating the firmware in Ledger? When you start updating, there is a magic value, magic register, magic part of the memory where the Ledger stores a certain magic value, in particular food babe. And when the update process starts, before the verification, the microcontroller sets this value to all zeros, And after writing the full firmware, it verifies that the signatures are okay, that the firmware comes from ledger, and if it is true, then it puts back the footbait to this register. So looks like you need, and you don't have access to this register during the firmware update. If you don't have a signature, you still have zeros, and so the hardware wallet will not start at all. So you need to put back the original firmware. The problem was that if you carefully read the manual for the microcontroller, you will see that the same parts of the flash can be accessed with different values, this memory mapping, so with different addresses. So this meant that if you try to put something into 0003000, it would effectively write this value to this magic memory region 830,000. So just using this simple bug that was caused by not carefully reading the documentation of the microcontroller, and it is easy to skip this thing because I mean it's 150 pages long, the documentation for the microcontroller. It's a pain to read it, but on the other hand, if you're developing the secure device, you should probably read it. You just can write whatever you want to whatever value you want, and then it looks like a valid firmware. And yeah, this was the video that they demonstrated. So your device is genuine, but you can play Snake on it. The problem is that so you still don't have access to the secure element, to your private keys, but you do control the display and the buttons. This means that in principle, by slightly changing the firmware, you, for example, can include something like, please always consider the second output as a change address, so never show it to the user. And then, together with a compromised computer, you can steal all the funds. So I still think that it is an issue. It was fixed, by the way. Then the architecture thing. Still about Ledger. Recent Ledger Model X, even though they kind of advertise it as a Bluetooth and on-the-go thing, the real nice thing about it is that they improved the architecture. So before on Ledger Nano S, they had this microcontroller that is like man in the middle. Basically, it controls all the important parts, like the screen and the buttons. So whatever you see it not from the secure element, but from this microcontroller. So if this guy gets hacked, then you're probably screwed, because again, you don't need to have access to the mnemonic itself. You just need to fool the user to get you the signature. So yeah, just displaying something weird is enough. Together with the previous attack, what you can have during the supply chain attack, when you slightly change the firmware here, you can set entropy to 0, and then or not even to 0, but to a defined value that is known by the attacker. And then all the users will always derive the mnemonics that you know. Then always hide the second output and play Snake. That's great. And this is another video already from Salem Rashid, where he was setting the entropy to 0, so he is initializing the new device, and the mnemonic looks like abandon, 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 abandon. Yeah, and the last one is different, but so basically it's when everything is 0, but obviously you can set it to arbitrary known by the attacker values. Okay, now about the cold card. So it is a pretty new wallet, and I would say that it is pretty safe, mostly because you can use it in a completely air-gapped mode, so you don't have a bidirectional data flow, and you just pass everything with SD card. But still, there is a question about the architecture. So what they use a secure key storage chip that can store your keys securely, but it cannot do any pin verification or elliptic curve calculation. This means that every time when you do sign in the transaction or whatever, you grab your private key from the key storage, put it into the microcontroller, then do all the calculations, and then when you are done, you put it back. The same happens basically with the pin. So with the pin, they use a certain counter inside here, and whenever you enter the wrong pin, the microcontroller increases this counter, and then asks the key storage for this counter on the next run and waits for corresponding amount of time. So what happens if you put a chip on this bus? And this chip is basically blocking the message that is increasing the pin counter. Then the pin counter will never be increased, and then what you can do, this is the demo. Basically, you can try as many pins as you want, one by one, without any delays. So initially it uses the way similar to Trezor, so first you wait 15 seconds, then more and more, and here you just need to enter them one by one, and well, still you need to wait for half a second before every try. It is hard-coded in the microcontroller, but, well, I think you saw that, yeah, so this is the second one. Trying something. So this way you can hack all the pins that are smaller than, I think, 6 digits. So Cold Card recommend you to use 8 or 10 digit pins, and this is exactly the reason. And the problem is.
Sorry, the reason is specifically because of this attack.
The reason is specifically about this brute force attack, because also what you have is to communicate to this key storage, you need to keep a parent secret. And as soon as you get this parent secret using any kind of attack that is that was demonstrated on Trezor, for example, then you can just drop all this stuff, directly connect your own fast microcontroller to this key storage, and without any delays, brute force all the pins. So still the communication will be, so there will be a limitation due to the communication speed, but yeah, I think that even 8-pin numbers are breakable if you know the parent secret. With this, in the middle in the bus, you can easily crack something like 4-6 digits in a couple of days. Yeah. So there is actually a solution that they decided not to take. So there is another counter in this key storage that cannot be resetted at all. So, and you can design the protocol in such a way that your mnemonic is stored encrypted there, and it is recoverable only until this counter reaches a certain value, let's say 10. But this would mean that in total you have only 10 tries to enter the wrong pin. So after 10 tries you need to throw away your device and get a new one. But on the other hand, then you don't have a brute force problem. Yeah, so there is a trade-off. So I think that they decided to go more to more user-friendly way than towards security. Yeah, so what else do I have? Yes, I wanted also to talk a bit about multi-signature in general. So this is an issue on most of the hardware wallets. Cold Card doesn't support it currently. They are working on it, but it is not released yet, and I will tell you why afterwards. Trezor supports multi-signature very nicely. So they verify everything, they show you the fee, they hide the change addresses from you, they can verify that they're indeed the change addresses and so on. But I mean, I saw on the Ledger website that, okay, buy our bundle. So how I would expect then what I do. I use this Bluetooth thing for my everyday expenses where I store some small amount. And then I use 2 of 2 multi-signature between these 2 devices to keep my life savings safe. So even, and this guy is stored somewhere in my safe at home. And then even if some guys will get into that and get this device, still I'm safe because I'm using 2 of 2 multi-signature. The problem is that first, when you try to display the address on the screen of the device, when you're using Ledger and multi-signature, you can't really do it. But it is important because imagine I want to be sure that I'm sending my 10,000 bitcoins to my multi-signature address. how would I do it if I can't verify that on the screen of the device? Because then what should I rely on? So this is the first problem. The second problem, yeah, I feel bad that I bought this device. This is the Ledger Model Blue or something. So it just never gets the firmware updates. They, I think, just dropped support for it, and they don't want to develop it anymore. And I feel like I just spent 300 euros for a brick. Yeah. So this is what the multi-signature transaction looks like when you try to do it on Ledger Blue. But yeah, still, even on the Ledger Nano S, when you try it, it will display you the fee, but it will not display that one of the addresses is the chain address. So again, I cannot verify that the money, the change money, are going back to my address. So I think that we really need to work more on the multi-signature side of the hardware wallets, because right now, if you are trying to use multi-signature, you actually decrease your security, and that is weird. Yeah. So then another problem on the protocol, this is probably the reason why Cold Cards still don't have the multi-signature support, and yeah, I currently put it into the mailing list. Basically, this is the missing piece in the partially signed Bitcoin transaction format. So the problem is, imagine that we have a 2 of 4 multi-signature scheme. We use, let's say, 2 hardware wallets, 1 air-gapped computer and 1 paper backup. And we have 4 keys, and we have our addresses that use all these 4 keys, and if there are 2 signatures, then we are fine. So then, when we are preparing the transaction, what we want? We have the input, we have the keys there, we need to know the derivation path for these keys, and then for our change address, our software wallet, watch-only wallet, should be able to tell us that, yeah, these are the keys derived from the same master keys as the inputs. Then we can consider that this thing is the change output, and we are good. The problem right now is that in the PSBT, you don't have the master public key field. You only have the derivation path, where you have a fingerprint and then derivation indexes. So this means that if I'm sending this information to one of these 2 guys, they will be able to verify that their keys are here, but they have no idea about the other 2. So they will have just to trust that they're not replaced by something else. So what the attacker can do, he can just replace 2 other keys by his key, and then using just a pure PSBT that Cold Card is trying to do, you can lose all the money, because, well, now the attacker also controls this output. Yeah, hopefully we will add XPub fields to PSBT soon, and then you are fine. And another thing that I want to say about the architecture and hardware in general. The problem is that we don't really know what is happening inside the chips, what capabilities they have, and maybe they have backdoors, and it was shown actually. So these are 3 research papers where the guy from Cambridge, Bagatov, Sergey, I think, demonstrated that there is a backdoor or some hidden functionality in the debug interface of the security-focused FPGA, and other things like how to make the microcontrollers work less securely than they should, like this glitching of Cortex-M something. So I would say that what I would like to see in the hardware wallets is first chips from different vendors, ideally open source cores. So right now the only option for that is a RISC-V architecture that is open source, the core itself. Unfortunately, it is, well, there are no security-focused devices based on that. Plus, all the vendors just take this open source core and put proprietary stuff around it. So pretty sad, but at least we have a core. So ideally, we should be able to take this open source core, put some open source anti-tamper and security features around it, and have a completely open source chip. That would be perfect. But for now, what we can do, we can at least stop relying on a single manufacturer and single chip. But let's say when we have Schnorr multi-signature, then we can just store the keys on different parts of our device, one on the secure element, on one microcontroller, another one on another one, and maybe the third one on the computer. And then we merge them together in such a way that not a single, well, the full key is never assembled in a single of these chips. Well, I mean, I think that I overcomplicated it, but yeah, or at least to make the hardware untrusted. So for that, I have one proposal that I wrote some time ago. Basically, imagine if you have a hardware wallet and this hardware wallet is hacked. And let's say you're super paranoid and you're using it in a completely air-gapped way, so you can go to remote parts and you're inside the Faraday cage and you do everything in a super paranoid way. So how can the attacker and this malicious hardware wallet disclose your private key? So there is a way, because in every signature that you are generating, you have a wonderful thing called a random nonce, the blending factor. So basically for every signature you need to generate a random number or pseudo-random number according to a certain standard, and then use it to generate the signature itself. So if the hardware wallet is compromised, he can pick whatever random number he wants, and including not random number, including the number that is known to the attacker. And then with this signature, you can leak some information about your private keys. And the attacker doesn't need to compromise your computer. It just needs to listen to to scan the blockchain for certain patterns, for certain keys or kind of transactions with a certain flags. And I think that I had a proof of concept demo there where I was able to extract the master private key in roughly 24 transactions. So what you could do instead, you don't let the hardware wallet to choose this random nonce. So what you have, let's say a software wallet that is not compromised and hardware wallet that is compromised. So it's kind of other way around comparing to normal assumptions. And then on the software wallet you generate a random number and send the hash of this random number to the hardware wallet. The hardware wallet then needs to commit to a certain certain nonce that it will use. So basically, after this commitment, it cannot change it, because otherwise you will reject it on transaction. Then you tell him really the random number and verify that for the signature, he was using this number plus this number. And then if one of these parts is honest, then you're safe, because in principle you will get even if this is a not random number, by adding a random number to it, you randomize everything. Yeah, and this actually, something like this is already implemented in Schnorr Music protocol, so we can just extend it also to ECDSA. Really? I'm done? Oh yeah. So it looks like I covered everything that I wanted. Guys, let's chat now, how overwhelmed you are. Well, so there are different types of supply chain attacks. First, when you swap the device to another one. Here, ideally, every device should come with a unique key that can be verified by you that this key belongs to, let's say, the vendor. So what you can do, you can ask the device to sign a random message, get the signature, and then verify that the signature corresponds to the private key, to the public key that you are expecting. So for example, we are sending you a hardware wallet. We are sending it over post, and we are also sending you an email with the public key of the device that is coming to you. Then the only way to forge the device is, well, to extract this key somehow. So if it is not possible, then you can basically authenticate the device that it was indeed the device that was sent to you. This is the first option. Then the second supply chain attack is when the chip is still there, but there are some kind of additional components or hardware implants, like How do you solve that? Cold card is doing pretty nice by using a transparent casing. I would say that all countermeasures of Trezor and Ledger are, well, Ledger don't have any. Trezor have this holographic thing that is not really secure. So for us, we are actually planning to do the transparent casing as well, but there are ways, like if you're thinking about really large amounts, then there are ways to make sure that the whole device is genuine. So I can tell you how. Basically, there is such a thing as physically unclonable function. Let's say you have a certain, well, the casing itself, and it obviously has a bunch of imperfections. And you can use these imperfections that appears just due to manufacturing process as a unique fingerprint of the device. And this fingerprint you can use to derive the some kind of secret key. And physically unclonable, meaning that it is extremely hard to manufacture something even close to that. So, and also what you can do, there are a few groups working in that direction, is that even if you drill a tiny hole of 100 microns, it is kind of the highest protection level, then you screw up this key. So there are a few ways. First, one approach from Fraunhofer Institute where you cover the whole device with a conductive mesh. And on the boot of the device, you are measuring the frequency response of this mesh. And from this capacitance and measurements, you derive the key. The second one is from Bochum. There was a talk at CCC. There, what you can use, you can emit the electromagnetic radiation from the inside of the chip. It will be reflected from the boundaries of the casing, and they will obviously interfere, and then you measure this interference pattern, and from this pattern you derive the key. And there is a third one that is kind of hard to implement, but might be possible, is when you use a speckle pattern and the optical propagation of the laser light. So basically you have a glass aquarium, let's say, so the casing that is made of glass. You put some laser light in there, it bounces back and forth and reflects and interferes due to imperfections of the material, and then again interference pattern, and everything is good. So this is like the ultimate level. The problem with these things is that it is still in the development, and it is also rising the price of the device quite a bit. And if you drop it, it may break, yes. Also, if in some of these solutions, if you increase the temperature, there will be a different key. So basically, to turn on your device, you may need to go to the room where you have exactly 22 degrees.
If your magnetic field changes, or like you move to another place,
so
magnetic field?
It is not very sensitive to magnetic field, so the this electromagnetic reflection and interference is sensitive to temperature because the air pressure and the density and the index of refraction changes, so the optical path is changing. With the mesh, it's easier, but the problem is that in our case, we need to put display in there somehow. That is kind of a problem. So right now what we decided to do is just we have a transparent casing and we have only the wires that are coming from the chip to the display, and then kind of every time when you turn it on you verify that okay, it looks good. Yeah, so it's not
Still a bit cool to have a compass, and then you have to hold it like in a certain direction and then enter the pin code.
And perhaps you should also be in the right mode.
In the right mode. Yeah, so in principle there are plenty of ways how you can move away from just the simple pin to something crazier. For example, yeah, the compass and the orientation, or some movement, so you make your magic dance, and then it unlocks. Also, like what we discussed in London, this challenge response, so you don't enter the same pin all the time, but let's say before you enter the digit, your hardware wallet vibrates a few times, and then you add this number of vibrations to your digit, and then every time your pin will be different. So yeah, different crazy things. But I mean, hopefully with the developer board you could do something like that, but for the consumer device, you don't want to go that crazy. Yeah, so sorry, yep.
Two questions, actually both related, and both of them slightly related to hardware wallets. So first one is about hardware, but not only hardware wallet, but mobile phones that are coming out with secure storage for private keys, for example. Samsung is coming out with a device similar to that. So in the future, we could perhaps see mobile phones that have got integrated hardware wallets. So based on what we know of these devices right now, have you explored any attack vectors to find out if they are really secure or not, like Samsung, for example?
Yeah, so
the first one, and sorry, and the second one related to that is right now we've got a lot of apps which are mobile wallets, and they use the secure storage for various data, especially the private keys stored securely on the mobile phone as well, like Abra, for example, and Blue Wallet, for example. So what are the attack vectors for such apps, and have there been any known breaches?
Yeah, so I didn't look closely into that. I heard a few talks about that. So my impression was that if it is implemented nicely, like all this, so basically you split your phone into two parts, your process into parts: unsecure world and secure world. So if these apps that are running on the secure side are implemented correctly, then you're pretty much safe. There are still issues with the shared memory and some side channels. So for example, by design, the secure storage is not resistant to side channel attacks. And by side channel attacks, I mean not even the physical side channels like power consumption and stuff, but you can, I think that you can check how much memory and how much processing time this process is using. So it is not a completely isolated, physically isolated different storage. It's like running on the same microcontroller, so you still have some issues. Also, if the application that is running on the secure side is screwed, then you're probably screwed. So just because, yeah, if that part has a vulnerability, you can exploit it, and you can get into the secure side of the process. So I would say that it is much better than just using an app. So better to use secure storage than not to use it, but it is not like an ultimate solution. So I would still say that for everyday expenses and salary scale, you can use your phone, but for larger, you need a dedicated device. Yeah, ideally cold storage.
Just to follow up on that, so again with mobile phones, using secure storage or any sort of encrypted storage for critical data like private keys and mnemonics and all that. Have there been any sort of dedicated attempts to perhaps, I don't know, decompile the app and try to figure out what the logic is? Because at one time or the other, the app will need to use it, and somehow that could be identified. Maybe not in iOS, but maybe in some of the Android device or something like that. Have there been any known issues like that?
You mean especially for Bitcoin applications?
Yeah.
So regarding that, I don't know. I think that it is still pretty new field also for the attackers and for the security investigators. And there are no kind of nicely developed toolbox to do all this kind of things. So I think that we will see some attacks in this direction later on as Bitcoin ecosystem evolves. But right now, I don't know about any of them. Yeah, so we just got some interest from the researchers into the hardware wallets, and then we have a very productive winter. Yeah, so maybe the next frontier will be like apps.
Thank you.
Can you have an attacker at the assembly level when they assemble the component and introducing?
Yeah. So for example, let's say when the microcontroller is talking to the display and the button, so this is the most obvious one. If you are using, let's say, Trezor T, they have a touchscreen. And if we are using Ledger X, there is a display controller that is controlling the device. So these are separate chips. Chips are kind of not the microcontroller itself, they're different ones. And they obviously have firmware. And with the standard components, you cannot verify that they are genuine or not. So you just talk to it and hope that it is okay. So on the assembly level, I would say that you can just flip the display driver to another one that analyzes what is sent to it and then changes it. Yeah, this is an issue. So on the touchscreen controller, the same. So you can add some functionality to the firmware there to touch the thing whenever something happens, some trigger happens. So it is a pretty sophisticated attack, I would say, so I doubt that we will see it in the wild, at least now. But in principle, they are possible. But on the other hand, vendors can ask the manufacturers of these touchscreen drivers or display drivers to use custom firmware there that also has a unique private public key pair. And then you can authenticate the device. The problem is that it becomes more expensive, and then you need to order in large scales in order to, well, get them interested. Yeah. Yeah.
A related question. So someone on Twitter said that the next attack on hardware wallet is going to be an insider job from the manufacturer of the wallet, the hardware wallet. So how do you protect, like, if you're a manufacturer and one of your staff is an insider and he's going to do an inside job? How are you going to protect against that?
Well, so my personal hope would be, so the thing that I said, like on the previous slide, this is exactly what I was trying to solve. I didn't trust, I don't trust the manufacturer at all. So I want to be able to operate to use the hardware wallet even if I consider that it can be hacked. So some kind of this untrusted setup would help. This is the first option. For the entropy, user provided entropy provided by the user. So if you don't trust the hardware random generator, you can also ask the user, okay, please keep pressing these buttons and I will tell you what are they, and then you can actually verify. So like, this is the number that I generated by the hardware random generator. You have a 32-byte number, I would say. Then you start hitting the buttons, and you have like a string that you hash together with this random number, and you get the entropy that is both by the hardware and by you. And you can verify it you can XOR in your head, right?
No, but I could just have the computer do a similar game as that, right?
Yeah.
An address that's derived from...
Yeah, I think that basically here we ended up with a random number that is not known by the computer and that is forced by the computer to be random. Yeah, so you can use the same schemes for the key derivation. I just don't like plugging anything to the computer, so that is why I thought about the kind of mind play. But on the other hand, the communication doesn't have to be over USB. You can use QR codes or whatever audio channel. Well, QR probably better because it's more like space constraint. Yeah. And then, yeah, that is the perfect world where you don't need to rely on the manufacturers or on the insiders and still operate securely.
They do take quite a few countermeasures. I think Ledger, for example, when they release a firmware binary, like a bunch of people have to sign off on it. So, and I think it's deterministically built as well. So it's not like somebody can just sneak a binary into a specific user's device.
Yeah. So another way I would say that you ship everything blank. Like the only thing that is on the microcontroller is the key from the factory that is verifying that the bootloader is fine. So then you can still mess up with the bootloader probably, or you can make a setup procedure that uploads the firmware and also updates the bootloader. And then if you trust if you build deterministically, you don't need to trust anyone, so you just build. You compare this against firmware from the vendor, because you still need to use the firmware from the vendor because it has signatures.
The other thing that's scary for me would be, or not for me personally, but that scares me, is some sort of government order to ship a firmware update to a specific customer plus a gag order. And so, like, they can't tell anybody else that they're doing it. So they could steal money from one specific user. And I think one solution to that could be that all firmware updates have to be committed to the blockchain, like the hash, in a predictable way. So then at least your own computer can see that there's a firmware update and that everybody in the world is seeing that firmware update. So you're not getting a special firmware update. That will be done on your computer, so it doesn't work if your computer is also compromised, but it would at least prevent somebody specifically messing with your hardware wallet. Make sense?
Yeah, I just don't like putting data on the blockchain.
I guess you could just put it up, but the problem is if you put it on a website, that website can look different from wherever your IP address is.
It's a
Yeah.
contract, then it doesn't cost any block space.
Yeah, I mean, this is like 1 UTXO per quarter, so you can do it efficiently.
Well, yeah. So you probably still can do it.
And
Yeah.
you can use warrant canary against the government.
Yeah, but you wouldn't need canary here because you just disclose every single update, and you know,
Everybody
if
has
you,
visibility. Everybody will have visibility. Right?
yeah, I think that's generally useful for all software updates because it's not just hardware wallets.
Yeah, might be. Well, probably the optimal way would be to run a sidechain for that.
Although I guess the government will work around this by just putting a camera in your home and waiting for you to enter the PIN code.
Or just taking you to their facilities and asking you to do whatever you want, whatever they want. Yeah.
There's different levels that in different countries they'll have different.
Different levels of paranoia. Yeah.
Alexa 2.0.
Yeah, I wouldn't want I would want there to be a ban on your neighbors having an Alexa, basically, because these things can hear you through the walls.
Violation of privacy.
Yeah, these things are scary, but then so is your phone.
So weird. Yeah, it's so weird that there's having millions of these and people are putting this in their homes.
But the phones are the problem too, and anything with a
Yeah.
camera can also be used as a microphone indirectly, because you can like film a Coca-Cola bottle through the window and like get the audio.
Yeah, there are other interesting side channel attacks on this kind of general thing. So, like, you can use your fan on the computer to send the data by speeding it up and slowing down. So it's a pretty slow thing, but still your fan can be the communication channel. Then I think that if you are using a standard computer that is plugged to your power plug and you are using a PS/2 keyboard, pretty old but still, then by listening the signal on the power on this power line in the same building, maybe a few floors aside, you can guess what keys did you. Well, basically you have a keylogger in your power plug. Yeah, so crazy stuff. In that sense, I would definitely recommend to watch some DEF CON and CCC and Black Hat talks. They're really amazing on the site. What you can hack and how. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I would have a bit more basic question about multisig.
Yeah.
That you said that ideally, like multi-device setup would be the best. But how about now using different devices for one multisig setup? Except Trezor is working quite well. But then what if you use Ledger, Trezor and Code Card for example?
Yeah, so Code Cards hopefully will get it soon. Ledger are not fixing this issue, so I don't really want to use, and I would not recommend Ledger to use Ledger in the multi-signature setup.
But even if you are checking the things in the Trezor.
Yeah, so the workaround that I found to do this is if I write a software wallet that asks Ledger to display at least his public key, his address corresponding to this change or receiving address, and then having my own do-it-yourself device that can show me like all the public keys and addresses of all the three, then it's kind of okay. But it is an ugly workaround, I would say. But maybe what can be done, I mean, their Bitcoin app is actually open source. So if someone would be willing to spend a few weeks of work and put in a proper support of the multi-signature in their app, then it would be probably great. But right now, yeah, as soon as Cold Card implements multi-sig, I would probably use Trezor and Cold Card. Yeah, as soon as we release, I think that I will just use our together with Trezor and Coldcard. I don't know any other nice hardware wallets, unfortunately. So.
And how about the PSBT format? Is it kind of a BIP, right? So
yeah.
It's like on work, so they can implement like the export field.
Yeah. So that is what I suggested recently.
Someone else would pick it up as well.
So hopefully, as soon as we have more and more hardware wallets that support PSBT natively, and if we continue working on the PSBT, then we will have many interesting applications. For example, another one that we are working right now with Trezor is how to implement coin join securely on the hardware wallet, and it is pretty challenging because here you have a bunch of inputs from random people, and you can actually fool the hardware wallet by saying that, okay, this input is yours and this one is not yours, even though both of them are yours, and then you flip it. Well, basically, yeah, there are ways how to, with recent setup and recent PSBT implementation, steal the money using CoinJoin. But hopefully also we will develop a scheme that makes it securely, and then ideally all the hardware wallets that support PSBT will be nice enough to work with Multisignature and CoinJoin and other stuff. Yeah.
So without PSBT, how are these wallets transferring the partially signed transactions?
So every vendor has their own format. Ledger are using APDU commands that are normally used in communication with smart cards. They have a very specific format in principle. Then Trezor is using Google's protobuf as a communication protocol, and basically they implement something very similar to PSBT. So just changing a few bytes, you will get PSBT and back, so it's easy to translate them back and forth. Then Coldcard is using PSBT. Others I don't really know, but basically before PSBT we had a bunch of different formats, and now we have plus one different format, but hopefully this one will become standard. And the nice thing is that we have a tool, HWI, that is in Bitcoin Core repository, I think, the Python tool that basically converts from the PSBT to any of these devices. So using that you can forget about all other standards, you only use PSBT, and then you will be able to communicate through this universal translator to all of the hardware wallets.
What's that tool?
It's called HWI, and basically hardware wallet interface. So it is in the same repository as Bitcoin Core. Well, not same repository, but the same organization. Yeah. And the nice thing is that it is actually pretty easy to implement. So if you decide to do your own hardware wallet, for instance, you take this tool, you make a few Python files, you write in Python, everything is nice and cozy and convenient, and then you have your own wallet integration into this this format, no matter what type of communication you use. Yeah, so pretty nice kind of effort and project, I would say.
Okay, so I've got a bunch of questions. One, so you went through some of the hardware issues. Most of them, if not all of them, were solved by firmware updates, right?
Yes.
So what would have to happen for them not to be able to be resolved by firmware updates? Is that possible? Or?
So now I think that I need to get to the computer because your phone is discharged. No, it just did. Yeah, I will try. Okay. Yeah, so here you just need to read the documentation. Yeah, here it was a problem on by the manufacturer, and basically they fixed it for a particular use case. So it's still an issue. Maybe it was fixed by the manufacturer afterwards, but it's pretty hard to update. Well, you can't update the hardware itself. So it was fixed in such a way that at least you can't extract secrets from the Trezor. So they had to place the secrets in a certain place such that when you load the device, the bootloader overrides this part and during the firmware updates and things like that. So it was really workarounds. And as far as I know, there is an attack that Ledger discovered on all Cortex-M whatever cores that are not really fixable. I think the Trezor guys would still fix it somehow in the software, but unfortunately Ledger did not disclose exactly the details of the attack, so no one really knows what it's about. So, and it is hard to fix something that people don't give you the information, right? In principle, I would say that most of the Trezor's problem are coming from the fact that they're using an application microcontroller that are not designed to be protected against all kind of hardware attacks. They try really hard and try really well to protect against all of them, but I feel like there will be more and more on the upcoming years just because of the architecture limitations. This is why I thought I said that my dream is to make a secure thing that kind of has internal power reference, internal some kind of folding watchdogs and anti-tamper mechanisms that is still open source, so that it would be used by all kind of hardware wallets. And you can verify that by putting it into the X-ray machine and checking the semiconductors that are there, but it's not like gonna happen in the nearest couple years. So it's more like a goal for a decade. But I mean, Bitcoin is changing the world, so we can also change the semiconductor industry.
And then you did a presentation on the role of hardware wallets in Lightning. I'm trying to understand how hardware wallets will be used with regards to end users and also routing nodes. I mean, routing node, I'm struggling to understand how routing nodes are going to even use it.
Yeah, so guys, you know Lightning roughly. Okay, well, you definitely know Lightning. The problem is, if you are a routing node, you have open channels, and you are routing the transaction. This means that someone offered you an HTLC that gives you some money if you give back the hash. And then you offer a slightly smaller amount of money to another node if he gives you the hash. And if he gives you the hash, you can pass this hash forward and then you earn some fees. So for the hardware wallet, this is important that you get all these kind of pairs together, such that you can verify on the hardware itself. You don't want to click the button all the time that, okay, yes, I want to earn 1 Satoshi, yes, I want to earn another 2. So instead, it should happen automatically as soon as you have 2 transactions that in total increase amount of funds of the user, right? So in principle, it looks like it's not that complicated. It becomes harder if you think about what can happen to this channel. Now I need a pen, but whatever. We have me as a hardware wallet and as a node, and then we have 2 guys, and I have 2 open channels with them. So if my node is compromised, this is the goal of the hardware wallet, right? So that if the computer is compromised, you still have the funds secure. And then this node closes the channel unilaterally. Then we wait for 1 day. We don't tell about this to the hardware wallet. Then the hardware wallet still thinks that there is a channel open and you can get channel updates. You kind of update the channel, increasing the funds of the user on this non-existing channel. And then you steal the money from the other channel. And then the hardware wallet will sign because, yeah, sure. So the problem here is that hardware wallets for Lightning need to monitor the blockchain. So they need to get every 10 minutes or whatever new blocks. They need to check the block, parse the block, and see that there are no channel closing transactions for the channel that they have. They need to store the database either on the node encrypted and authenticated or on the SD card. So plus you need real-time clock, because how do you know that the time lock didn't pass So you just well, kind of say the hardware wallet, no, the 1 day didn't pass yet. So we are just a few seconds later. So you need a real-time clock. So you need a lot of other stuff to make it happen.
Block header would be enough, right?
Well, imagine you start delaying the blocks. So instead of sending them every 10 minutes, you send them every 20 minutes.
Oh, delay
and
the blocks.
delay the blocks, yeah, and then what you have.
Valid, wouldn't they? Isn't there a lower and a higher?
Yeah, the time.
Yeah.
So the hardware wallet needs to know the time. It needs real-time clock because in the block you have the timestamp.
Yeah, but there's no constraints on the timestamp, but maybe only if you make them faster. Because if the block has a timestamp that's more than 2 hours, no, I guess.
Yeah. So it's plus minus 2 hours. Yeah. Yeah, but so yeah, if you don't have a real-time clock, you cannot verify that the block is that is coming to you is actually the current block, and it's not like 1 day ago. Then another problem is when what happens if you have this HTLC update, and then when you are trying to push another one, you get disconnected, and then this channel is closed, so you can still steal one routing payment because the node is still hacked. So there are plenty of problems in here, and it looks like that in general the hardware wallets that we currently have, they will still work and make your private keys for Lightning much more secure than when you store them in the node. But it is not a perfect security, because to have a perfect security of your keys, assuming that the hardware wallet is not hacked, is you also will need to have some kind of backup channel or watchtowers and other stuff. So the problem with the Lightning is that it is very interactive and very kind of have some time constraints. Yeah, but in principle, still, even having the secret keys on the hardware wallet and verifying this transaction, it is already much better. Yeah.
To me, to have Lightning on a hardware wallet, the hardware wallet needs to be a full node.
Why?
Because it has to monitor all these blocks and check that they're valid.
Well, not just that, it has to be one with like full access to the internet, because otherwise you're just performing an Eclipse attack. Yeah. And you can do all sorts of things with Eclipse attacks, including like making it look like the Bitcoin difficulty is going down. So there's probably nothing, like, you have to trust the computer that you're connected to, but at least you can have something like, okay, if let's say you have a little node at home and you connect it to a hardware wallet and you go on vacation and somebody breaks into your house. Now, it'd be nice if there's no way for them to take your money without like unplugging it, which would turn it off, or some other. Just that, I think, would be nice.
Yeah. Also, it would be nice to have like your Lightning node in the cloud without any secrets, such that you have public IP. You can do it however you want, and then you have your hardware wallet at home that is just connected to this node in the cloud, and then you don't put your private keys into the cloud of DigitalOcean or Amazon or Google. Yeah.
So you're still trusting them a little bit, but not.
Yeah, so in Lightning you can't completely remove the trust in your computer, but you can try at least to diversify the risks a bit.
Is it fast enough?
Well, I mean, depending on how many transactions you are routing. If you are trying to route like 1,000 transactions per second, that never probably happens in Lightning through one node, then you might have problems. But in principle, I think that it is like 30 milliseconds per signature. So hundreds easily. Yeah.
Yeah, just plug in multiple.
Yeah. Alternatively, you. Yeah. Alternatively, actually, you can have like HSMs, like this rack of hardware wallets that are processing that. Yeah, you can also have a load balancer and stuff. So just they all need to agree on the state of the channels. Yeah, or you can just run multiple nodes. It's also okay. Yeah, I don't know how many how many transactions you're routing per second.
I don't know how much per second, but we had 70,000 transactions in 3 months.
70,000 in 3 months, so yeah, easily doable with the hardware wallet if they don't come in within 1 second.
How durable are hardware wallets? Because a normal hardware wallet, you might sign, a couple of transactions, But now you're talking about signing, a lot of transactions.
Yeah.
So is it just going to burn out?
I don't think so. Why should they?
I don't know how durable they are.
Well, I didn't test them intensively, so I probably would just run our chip through a bunch of transactions. But as soon as we are not doing like heavy multi-party party computation, I think it's okay. Still, I think that even with thousands per day, you will have like one signature per second, and it is safe.
You're not writing the flash with every signature.
Yeah, I think that the hottest part in the hardware wallet right now is the display, actually. So and the chip itself, yeah, the signing is not a big deal there. Yeah.
It would be a great problem to have, actually. It should get so hot because we were moving so many lightning.
Yeah, if you earn 1 Satoshi per this joule, then it's pretty effective miner, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would mean that Trezor, the Lightning wallet in Trezor, would be a custodial wallet, custodial node.
Well, not necessarily. You still can run your own node, and Trezor plugs in into the computer. So why do you need to go custodial?
No, it was just thought it had to be custodial.
No, I think.
Hot wallet.
Yeah, it has to be hot. Yeah, so it has to be permanently connected to the computer. So and the problem there will be that if you leave your hardware wallet unattended in current setup, you kind of keep it unlocked because you entered the pin, so then people can steal your funds. So for that kind of stuff, you need to think a bit about, okay, auto locking, and then still kind of keeping the transactions going, and then asking the user to actually do this. Plus,
the coin join, right? So the coin join could be like you can leave it on at home, but it will only sign transactions that make it richer, and otherwise it turns itself off.
So and then we don't need to rely on the centralized service and pay the fees, but we can actually earn something with it. Or alternatively, a coin join transaction don't happen instantly. And right now, if you try to do it with the hardware wallet, you will probably need to confirm a few times. Like first you need to commit, second you need to actually sign. Then if the transaction fails, then you need to sign again, slightly different transaction. So another approach is like you commit once to a type of transaction. So not to a transaction itself, but just to a transaction that has to have these inputs and these outputs, and otherwise I don't care about other stuff. Yeah, and then you confirm once, and then the rest happens automatically. Yeah. So I would say that CoinJoin support will happen pretty soon in Trezor and in Wasabi, because Wasabi is already integrating hardware wallets, but you can't use it with CoinJoins. But the next step would be actually to make it happen. I think that, well, not in 2 weeks, but maybe in a few months it might be. Yeah. 2 weeks. It is doable in a few months.
So L&D uses macaroons. Do you know much about macaroons?
Not really, because I normally work with C Lightning, and.
So would you set L&D up such that if you're signing transactions, you require a hardware wallet? If you're just doing read-only functions, you wouldn't.
What kind of read-only function? The only read-only function that doesn't require your private keys. So in Lightning there are 3 types of private keys, right? So first one that is controlling on-chain transactions, another one that is controlling channel updates, and the third one that is controlling your node ID. So I would say that keeping node ID on the Lightning node is fine, and then you just can broadcast your channels or connect to other nodes, and but you cannot open channels, you cannot route payments. You can't do anything valuable actually. You can only watch the network and observe what is happening there.
It's still useful for things like watchtowers. You don't necessarily have to have the ability to sign transactions.
To be a watchtower, do you even need to be a Lightning node? I think you can just sit and watch the blockchain. So it's just the kind of some service built on top of Bitcoin D or something. Yeah.
another question. You said then, I can't remember which presentation. You said C has a bunch of built-in functions. Many of them are not secure.
Yeah.
So, using C, is that just a challenge of training developers to only use the secure functions and not use the insecure ones, or is there a problem with using C generally, and that people should use other languages such as Rust?
So C, well, yeah, C has a bunch of functions that are not secure, but you can use secure versions of them, and if you know what you're doing, you're perfectly fine working in C. Still, it's just, well, you can easily make mistakes there, and you can use some kind of tools like static code analyzers, or cover everything with tests, and also hire smart developers that are careful enough and had experience in security, embedded security, for example. So it is doable, because still most of the embedded devices are written in C, and I bet that even the Java virtual machine that is inside the smart card was written in C. So you can make a secure firmware in C. It's just much easier if you use a memory safe languages. So you just decrease number of potential bugs, you make the overall flow easier, you spend less time on that, and so in that sense Trezor decided to go with MicroPython, and it is a pretty good choice. I still think that it is not very well developed yet, so it may have some issues, but well, probably better than C. Cold Cards is doing the same, and I think that they even use the Trezor's MicroPython bindings to the Trezor's crypto libraries. Yeah, by the way, careful with that. This means that security updates on the Trezor crypto libraries will appear on the Cold Card a little bit later, right? Because they are a fork. Yeah, then what is interesting right now, embedded Rust is super interesting because, well, basically Firefox were tired of the memory consumptions and leaks in the Firefox, so they invented a new language, but they also designed it like a system programming language for security and critical applications. And now it is going to embedded development, so you can start playing on a few boards. I think that they support around 10, but you can port to any board, and you can have both C parts of the code that you normally get from the manufacturer of the libraries and API and kind of this hardware abstraction layer, and you can write also the Rust parts, and they kind of all work together. And there is even an OS, stock OS, that allows you to write everything in C, but you can be sure that each process is separated from each other. So even if you have bugs in the SD card driver or FAT file system driver, you don't expose any secrets, because there are mechanisms, and you have this kind of supervisor of the whole flow. Yeah.
I have a question. We totally forgot about McAfee's super device. Is it secure?
I didn't look at it.
Huh?
I didn't look at it. I don't know.
It's an Android phone, isn't it? There's no secure element.
The Bitfear something. McAfee said that it's unhackable, but it's.
And yeah, it was hacked like the next day or so.
Well, you can run Doom on it, but is it really hacked? Can you extract private keys out of it?
I don't know. Well, yeah, on the one hand, so we have like a bunch of new game consoles. McAfee's Doom, Ledger's Snake. You can also upload custom firmware on Trezor and play whatever game you want there.
Was the McAfee problem also that it was just a phone number plus a password, so you could just brute force and start taking money from random people?
I don't know. I wanted to ask.
Unfortunately, I didn't look into. Well, fortunately, I didn't look into this product, and I feel like I don't really need to spend time on that.
So security consultants usually consider this as not a player in the market of hardware wallets.
Well, yeah.
Not a major.
Yeah, there are also other hardware wallets that are based either on Android phones or let's say something like Raspberry Pi, and I don't think that they're really secure. So the only way, for instance, to make a reasonable hardware wallet on Raspberry Pi is that if you get rid of the whole operation system and you just program on the bare metal, so like the powerful microcontroller that it has, and then you have a pretty nice thing that is super fast. It's hard to glitch. Well, with a precise timing because it is fast, it is multi-threading, and so on. So still a reasonable choice, but just don't run a full OS on there. I think it's too much. Yeah.
So from what we see is like there's Ledger and there's Trezor, and then there's
other stuff.
There's other stuff, and the other stuff is there's nothing really coming up. Maybe Cold Wallet,
Cold Card, yeah,
is coming up. But even KeepKey is nowhere in terms of traffic or sales. So everything that we talk to CTOs or competitors is like, okay, Trezor, Ledger, and then there's...
Well, I don't know. Who has hardware wallets that are not Trezor or Ledger?
I have a code card here.
Ah, Cold Card. Cool.
Obsec.
Huh?
Obsec.
Good. Yeah, sure. It's empty. And it has a kill pin as well.
Yeah, so I think that it's more or less clear. Market is mostly covered by ledgers and Trezors. Yeah, I mean, I personally, for example, have 2 ledgers and 2 Trezors, and I have digital bitbox, but I didn't use any of them actually for Bitcoin storage. I just playing with them and I like to see how they look inside. Yeah.
So another question. So we wrap up. Would you just like to I'll give you an opportunity to talk about crypto advance? If there's anything you'd like to talk about crypto. If there's not, then we'll end.
Yeah, just quickly to say that we are doing not just a hardware wallet, but hopefully a whole platform so that people can do. Because, well, one quote that I really liked from one of the talks is that your security model is not my security model, but yours is probably fine. So if we can make a tool that is flexible enough to cover all craziness of Bitcoin hodlers so that they can play with it and make something custom for them, then it would be great. So this is what we are focusing on, as well as on the normal hardware wallet, because normal people also need to store Bitcoin somewhere. And we are currently in the fundraising phase, yeah, and we are here today and tomorrow until roughly 3 p.m. and then we fly back to Munich. So if you are interested in developing something on top of our platform or any other, talking about hardware security or about our project, then yeah, talk to us. We are here. Yeah.
I don't think the video will be up by the time we've flown back. But,
yeah, and I need to say that I didn't try to say that everyone is bad. And we are good, because we will also fail at some points and have certain attacks. So I hope that in, let's say, maybe not in a year, but in 2 years, I will come here again and give a 2-hour presentation about our hacks and how we fixed them. Huh?
Only 1 hour, please.
Yeah, okay, 1 hour, and without the fuck-ups session, I hope.
Thanks very much, Stepan.
Thanks.